Okay, we just had a big report land this morning indicating that a huge part of the reason why the PGA Tour and LIV negotiations have really come to a grinding halt is because there are a number of players who are demanding that those on the LIV side of it who receive these massive payouts and bonuses for joining LIV must hand that money back or in some other way recompensate the PGA Tour and its players if they're going to move forward. On top of that, we had Tiger Woods in New York City negotiating with the PIF once again. We've also got some quotes from Jordan Spieth that I want to dig into, where he basically is trying to say that it's no one's fault that things haven't gone much further, but importantly, he's indicating that this is just not sustainable and something's got to be done. And on top of all of that, we recently saw the PIF and LIV basically trying to go around the PGA Tour and negotiate directly with the DP World Tour, including offering quite a bit of money for guys like Jon Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton to be able to play in DP World Tour events, because the big point there is, remember, that is their key to playing in the Ryder Cup. So we got a lot to get into. We've got a lot of quotes to talk about. But first, of course, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. And guys, in the pursuit of speed and playable distance, Titleist engineers developed a new material construction that unlocks the next generation of driving excellence. The new GT Driver Series represents the biggest technological leap ever in Titleist driver design. And we personally had the opportunity to test a bunch of the heads when we went out to TPI. I got fit into the new GT2, which is really the ultimate forgiveness in forgiveness and speed, really across the face, which I love. And Mike, you have the GT3. You get speed, you get control, being able to really dial it in. So we could talk about our experience all we want, and it's been incredible for us, but I think the real key is for you guys to experience it for yourself. So go to Titleist.com, find a fitter near you, go out there, hit all the heads, see which one works for you, and your game will definitely thank you for it. So, Mike, we've got a lot to cover, and it's all unfolding really quickly. It feels like it's feast or famine. Either we get no news on the PGA Tour deal, or we get a ton.
Well, this sounds like middle school drama, right? You got people going behind people's backs. You got, you better do this, or we're not going to do this, and all this stuff. But I get it. I mean, I understand the PGA Tour players are still really angry, and they're holding this grudge about, hey, we were offered this money, we didn't take it, you guys did. So I've always said from the beginning, like, that's going to be a major stall.
Right.
They're not going to be happy.
And we're going to dig into some of those quotes. But on the LIV side, you got the guys who rightfully so are saying, and I remember this from Dustin Johnson, some of the others, we assumed all the risk.
Sure.
We were the ones who left the PGA Tour and put our career up, hanging in the balance. So with risk comes reward, and we should get paid for that. So that's a huge sticking point, but there's both sides of it. So you guys weigh in the comments, as you guys always do. Let us know your thoughts, but let's kind of like build kind of like how we got here and some of these other important news stories that kind of build up to that. The first one is this whole thing with Tiger Woods and PGA Tour officials meeting in the New York City with the PIF. And
it wasn't long ago, right?
It really wasn't. It was just last Friday. And it's so funny the way these things go down. You've got the flight trackers that they use to track, the Tiger's private jet, Jay Monahan's jet, and they realize that they're all in the same place, and that's how we do this. But the sad reality is this, and this is something that I've said over and over here on the podcast, is that I think a sign of good leadership is good communication. And here we are, we're speculating because we're seeing where their jets are going. You've got some news, outlets are on top of this and seeing that they're negotiating, but then crickets. Nothing comes out of it. And I think everything kind of went dark for a few days. And I think that's what's led to some of these quotes from Jordan Spieth and others that we'll get into. But it's like, we see that these guys are meeting, but then we hear nothing. And that is why so many of us just truly don't believe that anything is actually getting
Kicking
done.
the can down the road.
Precisely. So that's exactly what happened with this particular one. The meeting did occur. There was nothing really formal, no formal announcement that we saw from anyone. You do have guys like Jay who get to step out of the spotlight with the PGA Tour wrapping up its regular season, not having an event going on this week, and then as part of that, they don't have to be in front of the cameras and say where reporters can hold them accountable and say what was said in this meeting.
President's Cup, might, right? I think Jay's gonna have a presence there. You think?
I would think he would have to, because it is a PGA Tour.
So maybe he'll be put on
blast
blast there. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. So we'll wait to hear if there's anything comes out of that. In the meantime, kind of moving over to what Jordan Spieth had said. So this was an interview that Jordan had done with Golf Week. And, they had got into a lot of stuff talking about Jordan Spieth's, recent injury and the surgery and stuff like that. But remember, Jordan Spieth is a guy who sits on the PGA Tour policy board. He is one of the few that are directly involved in these negotiations.
Right.
Therefore, he is going to feel the heat and the questioning coming down from media outlets saying, like, what is really going on here? So we got some quotes here that we want to dig into. So part of that interview, and I would encourage you to check out the whole thing on Golf Week. But what Jordan had said was, the best players at the top levels have significantly benefited from this scenario that's probably unsustainable. And hopefully that's currently being worked out. He goes on to say, it's not as easy as, hey, everybody, let's just get together and figure this out in an hour. He said, I've been very involved in all of that, and I can assure you that as annoying as it probably seems from the outside, it's just not anyone's fault. It's just the process of what needs to happen. It's just going to take a little bit more time. So there, at least, thankfully, we feel a little bit heard that it's acknowledged that it's annoying. Because it is annoying to continue to go through this week after week and not have that consistent update of what's going on.
Right. Yeah, it's getting annoying. It's getting tired at this point because all these deadlines that keep passing.
Right.
And we have hope, but then we're just like, I guess not.
But let's also read between the lines there. In that first quote that he said, where he said, the best players at the top levels have significantly benefited from this scenario that's probably unsustainable. I think this is what's going to tie into what we're going to talk about in a second here, with the players basically demanding that the LIV guys pay back some of that money that they made. Jordan is addressing something, I think, getting out ahead of it there, because he knows what talks are happening and he knows what the pushback's going to be. Effectively, he's saying that all players have benefited from this. And yes, the guys from LIV and guys like Jon Rahm taking a $300 million contract got huge payouts. But if you look broadly, the pressure that LIV put on the PGA Tour with its purses, and in an effort to not steal more players away, that's where all of a sudden we got things like signature events with $20 million.
Exactly.
Whatever. We got these big bonuses that were recently handed out to players. The PGA Tour started throwing money out in a way that would not have ever happened. And if you guys disagree with me, you can argue it in the comments and let me know. But I don't believe any of that increase, that dramatic increase in the amount of money that PGA Tour players were making, would have ever happened if it wasn't for LIV and this whole LIV thing coming and shaking everything up. Now, you can also argue, and I would tend to agree with you, that doesn't mean it benefited the sport in any way. I think in a lot of ways it alienated a lot of fans with the huge amount of money that was thrown around. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a good thing across the board, but for those who might be hung up on the idea of saying, like, I don't want a merger until those guys give the money back, maybe you look a little broader and say all the top players got richer over this deal.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously the LIV guys, because the numbers were so astronomical, they got richer.
Absolutely.
They were ridiculous, right?
That scale tips heavily on their end, I believe.
Totally.
Yes.
But why wouldn't if the Saudis, if they just want to get this deal done on their end and they want to merge it, it benefits them, I'm sure, right? To get their guys back in the spotlight, get them in majors and all this stuff. Why wouldn't they just help pay the money back? Like, hey, Rahm, you owe $100 million. Tell you what, we got it.
Well, listen, I mean, it's still, you're talking, and we'll talk about this because it is a certain degree. You could say they have like deep pockets, unlimited pockets, but you could also say that LIV is creating a situation for itself where it's become more and more sustainable, self-sustaining. It's getting to a situation where it's growing on its own. And we've talked about this here on the podcast, that how much do they really need the PGA Tour? And if you're talking about now these astronomical numbers, let's say it's just Rahm's contract. If they wanted just that $300 million paid back, if you look at it from the PIF side, even with their deep pockets, they may say, this is not a very smart business move. That we paid $300 million to get Rahm, and then we're going to pay the same amount, $300 million for him to go back and play there again.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, no, it's a sticking point for us. So that's where this thing is like complex. And that is where Jordan is saying, it's no one individual's fault. I think he's trying to take some of the blame off of guys like Jay Monahan and Tiger Woods, who've kind of really headed up the whole conversation in the negotiations like right now. And it's like more complex and deeper than you think. The problem that I have with that is that ultimately it's still indicating that we're just not getting any closer. You can make excuses. You can say it's no one's fault. I get it. You don't want people to assume the blame. But in the same token, the more they describe how complex this is, and as Jordan said, it's not something that happens in an hour, the more it kind of gives us all less hope that something's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, keep this in mind. Remember, it was only just a couple months ago that you had Jimmy Dunn, who was kind of like the architect originally of this whole thing of with LIV and the potential merger, him resigning and citing at the time that his resignation was due largely to a lack of progress, that nothing was happening. And then you had the continued kind of fumbling the ball where you had Rory McIlroy, who was part of the PGA Tour policy board. He goes and leaves because, feeling a little bit, as he said, like the sacrificial lamb.
Yep.
And he wanted to then focus on his game. And then, as Rory tends to do, he kind of made a 180 and asked to come back to the PGA Tour policy board in order to try to get the deal done, to which was met with guys like Cantlay and Spieth saying, kind of turning that down and saying no.
Yeah.
So it just, to me, these quotes just kind of show that we're still in a way that we're not getting as close as we want to get.
Do you think anything will ever get done? I just feel like when you have this much amount of money and egos and all this stuff, it almost feels like it's impossible, because we've said this before, both leagues are running independently, and I feel like they're running independently just fine.
Well, here's where it comes down to, and this kind of comes right into our next point. There's still definitely a heavy motivation to get something done. Yes, you could say over time, the longer this plays out, the less that they might be compelled to come together, because they're each creating their own journeys, like LIV with what it's doing, the PGA Tour with its signature events, etc. Maybe like thinking less and less we need each other. But one huge indication that, at least on the LIV side, that they still need, in a way, a deal done, was this recent negotiation with the DP World Tour. So this one's really interesting. Remember, keep this in mind. As it stands, the way that the Ryder Cup works, on the European side, it's controlled by the DP World Tour. Now remember, on the United States side, it's the PGA of America, not the PGA Tour. So that's why it's handled a little bit differently on each side of the pond, right? But in order for guys like John Rahm, Terrell Hatton, these guys to participate in the Ryder Cup, which we know, and it's been said, guys like Rory want to happen. Okay. I'm never going to champion that, because Rory wants Rahm on his team, right? In order for that to happen, they have to have some sort of status on the DP World Tour. Part of that status is that they need to play 4 events per year. One event that counts as part of that is the Olympics.
Yep.
So you get a guy like John Rahm, who's got one event already under his belt, but he needs more. Now remember, going back to the original policies that were put in place, when these guys participate in a LIV event instead of a DP World Tour event, they're assessed fines and suspensions. Plenty of guys have repaid their fines in attempts to play DP World Tour events and then use that as eligibility. A lot have said behind the scenes, it's not actually coming out of the players' pockets. It's LIV that's paying that money.
Okay.
But regardless, money's being paid.
Yep.
John Rahm is currently in the middle of a appeals process, appealing the rulings of the fines and suspensions against him by the DP World Tour. Part of that appeal allows him to continue to move forward and play in those events while the appeals play out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Now, I'll read some quotes. This is reported on by Sports Illustrated, and effectively, in a nutshell, what they're saying is that recently, in August, LIV Golf reached out directly to the DP World Tour, giving offerings to basically negotiate directly with them, and I'll give you all the details, but in a nutshell, what they were saying is that LIV would repay all of the fines, and LIV would actually even rework its schedule in order to not have LIV events going forward conflicting directly with the big events on the DP World Tour. That was part of their offering. In addition to that, they were also going to offer additional money that would be used to boost the prize purses on the DP World Tour.
Wow.
Right. Seems like a pretty significant offering. So let me get into some of the details and read what was said here from Sports Illustrated. So according to a source with knowledge of the situation, Sports Illustrated has learned that prior to the back and forth between Rahm and the DP World Tour last week that saw him appeal his sanctions, allowing him to play in upcoming events, LIV Golf sought to strike a deal with the DP World Tour that would wipe out the penalties for players while offering various concessions and a monetary payout from the league. The source said that LIV Golf sought a resolution in August that would eliminate the fines and clear the way for LIV players to compete in DP World Tour events without the various restrictions. Going on, it said, LIV representatives met with the DP World Tour officials and proposed schedule adjustments that would assure LIV events would not be played against some of the tour's more prominent events, such as the LIV Golf Dallas tournament, which is the same as the DP World Tour's BMW PGA Championship. An exemption category for DP World Tour players into the 10 international events on the Asian Tour that carry $2 million in purses and cash. The amount was said to be £6 million to put towards purses with the ability to add more if needed. So,
interesting.
And you guys tell us in the comments, how strong do you feel like that deal really was? Do you feel like that was a just kind of a surface offering, or do you feel like that was a strong offering that LIV came forward to with the DP World Tour? What I think is very interesting ultimately is that the fact that LIV is going directly to the DP World Tour for this negotiation.
Right.
Keep one thing in mind. The DP World Tour and the PGA Tour entered into that strategic alliance.
Yeah, they're like best buddies.
Right.
Yeah.
In 2021, they had that strategic alliance. So in a way, it was a risk on LIV to be like negotiate, when in a way then be like, we can't negotiate independently. We have to negotiate together. That's why ultimately the deal was rejected. Right. And here's the response. So in response, a DP World Tour spokesman told Sports Illustrated, "We met with them and listened to their proposal, but did not accept it, as our view remains that the focus should continue to be on all stakeholders working together to reach an overall solution that benefits our sport." So that's their way of saying, like, we're not doing a deal without the bigger thing of PGA Tour enterprises and all them being involved.
So then this is where the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan should step in and be like, guys, great. If you want to go and do that and you want to let these guys get their world ranking points, get Ryder Cup points, and be able to show up to the majors, that's going to ultimately grow this thing and make everyone happy and complete this thing we're trying to do, then do it. We're not going to do it. You guys do it.
But what benefit does that have to Jay? Jay's that it would be taking. If you're talking from a pure negotiation standpoint, that's almost taking Jay's last bargaining point away.
Well, why does
that's why they did the strategic and not alliance. If they do that, then LIV really starts to say, we really don't need the PGA Tour then.
Well, does the PGA Tour need LIV golfers?
Great question. If they don't do an agreement, they're creating a competitor.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So I think that gives no benefit to the PGA Tour to allow that to happen, because now the LIV and the DP World Tour are working hand in hand to get the guys everything that they want. Ryder Cup, official World Golf ranking points. That takes all the bargaining chips away from the PGA Tour. Remember, the PGA Tour still wants to get something out of this, that it doesn't become more appealing for more PGA Tour players to now leave PGA Tour, go to LIV,
there you go,
and use the DP World Tour as their backdoor to official World Golf rankings and on the European side, Ryder Cup.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Yep. So now if you took a guy like Scotty Scheffler and he left for LIV, what he would be losing the only last bargaining chip in their hand would be the U.S. Ryder Cup team. Mm-hmm. But guys like Rory could just say, all right, PGA Tour, that was the last straw. I'm out. Goes to LIV, takes this huge payout, plays in the DP World Tour, plays in the Ryder Cup, plays in the Olympics.
Gets into the Masters.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that ultimately is not happening. Now,
interesting.
There's a couple ways to think about this. The one way to think about this is you got plenty of voices. We hear them all the time. We hear them in the comments. We hear them in the media who are going to say, guys like John Rahm were fully aware of this policy before they left. They knew that the DP World Tour was doing fines, suspensions, restrictions.
Yeah, they were. Mm-hmm.
For him to then cut the deal, take $300 million, and then go and try to fight it and try to pay, try to appeal it and all those things. A lot of people say, shame on you. You know what I mean? You knew this. It wasn't a surprise to you. Mm-hmm. Some other guys, early goers, like maybe it was like I'm thinking like even going back to a Mickelson or a Poulter. Yeah. You could say to them it might have been a surprise because they joined and then the restrictions started to come out. But guys like John Rahm, Tyrrell Hatton, you made your bed. You got to sleep in it.
Yep.
Some people are going to say that. Other people are going to say, hey, this was a really reasonable offering on the LIV side. They pay back all those fines and suspensions. They throw their deep pockets around, and now, it's better for DP World Tour because they have bigger purses, etc. They have better, and some of them are saying, listen, you've got a better product because now Rahm's playing again. You can pull bigger sponsors. You can sell more tickets. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, but where it lands is that nothing is fully agreed on. That deal was killed. Rahm is still tied up in legal battles of having these appeals, and as of right now, his Ryder Cup status is still largely in question over it.
And do we know if he's playing in the Spanish Open in 2 weeks? There was rumors that he wasn't.
As of right now, he's playing in the Spanish Open because the appeals have allow him to still do that while it's being appealed. It looks like the timeline of that is going to allow him to play in it. That would give him another step towards his required 4. But keep this one thing in mind. That's 2024. The Ryder Cup's 2025. He's also had to get 4 events under his belt in 2025. So they are hard-pressed right now to get some sort of deal done. It's really important.
Got it.
Now, I want to get into the real big, the kind of, the overall big sticking point. This big news just dropped this morning, Bloomberg report about the major thing that's kind of muddying all of this up is the fact that players on the PGA Tour side are not happy with LIV golfers being able to keep that money, and they've got a bunch of different suggestions above and beyond paying it back. Before we do, I just want to stop and thank our other sponsor, FootJoy. Let's just do a quick break here, and then let's jump into it.
All right, guys. So FootJoy is unquestioned the leader in performance golf rainwear, and with their new Hydro Series line of rain jackets, I mean, they're raising their rain game even higher. I mean, we're in the season now. We're going to the fall, the rain, the hurricane season. It's out there, and I don't want it to stop our rounds because we try to get as much golf as we can in, Frank, before the snow comes. Right?
Bonus golf.
It's
baby.
Bonus golf.
Bonus golf.
And Hydro Series is the most comprehensive lineup of high performance rainwear in golf. I mean, these guys are smart. What they've done over there with the DryJoy Select, the Hydro Light X, the Hydro Tour, the Hydro Knit, I can go on and on about all of the rainwear that they have created just to keep you warm, to keep you dry. It's waterproof. Stuff beads. They even came up with something where the water doesn't go down your neck.
The double collar.
The double collar.
Love the double collar.
I mean, genius. I mean, the last thing we want is to be soaked out there. So, listen, it all adds up, and being able to play more golf and better golf, regardless of the conditions, that's what we want. So go to FootJoy.com and check out the entire rainwear lineup today.
Okay, so like I said, this report hits today. I will say that the Bloomberg original article is behind like a paywall. So if you don't subscribe to Bloomberg, you might not be able to get it all. We're starting to see is just it was caught fire on the internet this morning. So we'll give you some of the quotes directly from it. You will be able to still get the information. It's going out there all over Twitter, and other news outlets are now reporting on it. So effectively, let's just kind of get to the crust of it, and you can kind of see it all in this quote here. He said, "A deal isn't a certainty, and talks may still fail. A particular sticking point is Jon Rahm's reported $300 million LIV contract. Some PGA Tour players want Rahm and others to hand back money that they've made from LIV. Other options include fines to participate in events, giving to charity, or agreeing to forfeit any future career winnings to the PGA Tour." So,
what?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, look, I mean, we've said this before here on the podcast. We've said that a big part of where negotiations get hung up is that the PGA Tour is a member society, meaning like all the guys have to kind of more or less be in agreement. And you've got a lot of PGA Tour members, all independent contractors. So it only takes, a handful of voices who just are hung up on this idea that these guys made all this money and left that could really kind of gum up the whole works.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I thought it was interesting in that quote of saying like, we don't, other opportunity would be them paying the money back, but money going to charity. But if you think about it, some of this you could see on the LIV side. How is this going to be reasonable for them to do? Imagine you saying, "Oh, you can come back to the PGA Tour, but you have to forfeit all your career earnings." So what are you doing? You're playing for free?
Yeah, no one's going to do that.
Right? Like, oh, you get to keep Rahm. Let's use him as an example. You get to keep your $300 million contract. You come back to the PGA Tour, but whatever you win, you forfeit it.
Yeah.
He'll be like, why? It almost seems like a non-starter.
Yeah, stay where I am. And he just won $18 million plus.
Right.
Where he is.
Right. He continues to do that. But it's weird. Like looking through it, it makes me wonder, like, is this a real thing that they want equal share, or is it more so want a punishable thing? It's almost like they're saying some of these players, and I can't point to who the players are because they're not indicated here, but it's just saying like, are you saying like, I don't even care if I get the money, but it's just not fair that he got more. I want it paid back. Just give it to charity if you have to.
So to that point, I guess I was going to ask you then, what do these retention bonuses do, if anything? I guess nothing.
Right. Like that's what I'm saying. It comes back to what I said at the top of the show. And it comes back to Jordan Spieth's quote of saying like, listen, all the best players made out more from this. The retention bonuses that you mentioned, these guys got huge payouts for staying on the PGA Tour. You know, who did they give them back to?
They should.
That's the question. And then I think the big sticking point and why, to me, this more seems like not what I would call a real valid attempt at a solution, because A, like I said, none of that seems like it would be something that the LIV side would agree to anyway. But B, you come back to the same sticking point where LIV golfers have said, you know, when this first happened, all the top players were given offers, right? And that's kind of something we've heard, like whether it be Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele, all of them in one way or another have indicated that money was put on the table. Victor Hovland, that an offer was put there on the table. And with that money came a risk. And you see Jon Rahm facing that risk right now. Yeah, that he's in appeals to even see if he'll ever be able to play in the Ryder Cup again. So on the sticking point on the LIV side, and I can't say I disagree with these guys in that way. It's just saying like, hey, we took that big money, but we also took huge risks, and we gambled on our careers. So we're not paying it back.
I wonder if almost every LIV person just kind of, like you said before, knew what they were getting into. It's like guys like, I don't need to ever go back to the PGA. Like Rahm could quit tomorrow and be fine for the rest of his life financially. Right. He could just say, the heck with it. I'm done with this nonsense.
Or guys like Rahm could forfeit effectively his ability, you know, by not continuing these appeals to play in the Ryder Cup, to play in the Olympics, but just forever continue playing on LIV, making big money, and generational wealth, and there you go. So, but that's what I'm saying. The idea is, if you look at this big picture, it's still not all cut and dry. There's very muddy, because there is still things that guys want. Jon Rahm wants to play in the Ryder Cup. Rory, who's on the PGA Tour side, wants him in that Ryder Cup. You know what I mean? So there's still sticking points that keep driving the potential for a deal forward. But then there are still these huge gumming up the works where you've got just so many players involved. Now you've got so many entities. We saw it here with like the DP Tour. That might have been a great deal for the DP Tour to take when LIV proposed it. But they've got their ties directly with the PGA Tour and the benefits that comes for them having a strategic alliance there. Now we've got so many cooks in this kitchen, it almost seems impossible to come up with something delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Right. So it is a crazy scenario, but this was a big one, and I think this is going to be a hot talking point, and I think without a doubt you're going to see coming up even more quotes and stuff on this, because you're going to have this, since this big Bloomberg report came out, you're going to have, when players hit that press conference room, they're going to be asked directly what their feelings are on it. And I think you're going to see the media try to pick apart who it is really who's sticking this and saying they can't until they give back the money. You're going to start to see that. So stay tuned. We'll continue to report on all of this as it comes out. But a big news day that we've been waiting for, at least some news. Unfortunately, it's not quite the news we wanted of some sort of agreement. Like Jordan said, it's not sustainable. We need something. But at least we've got some little tidbit of information of what's kind of holding everything up. Make sure you guys subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next one.